have the second panel of the day, deliberating on the topic, mitigating policy friction. The panel will discuss issues that are critical to the understanding of policy friction, such as fiscal prudence versus public rent-seeking behavior, the making of a submerged state, clientelism versus special interest groups, and withdrawing of the policy. I would like to invite the esteemed panelists on the stage. Dr. Mukul Saxena, Professor. Dr. Mukul Saxena, Professor, Kautilya School of Public Policy, Hyderabad. Dr. Amir Ullah Khan, Professor, MCRHRDI Institute, Government of Telangana. A. Vani Prasad, Director General, Environment Protection Training and Research Institute. Dr. E. Venkatesu, Professor, Department of Political Science, Hyderabad Central University. I would like to request Dr. Mukul Saxena to kindly moderate the session.
Hi, how are you? You know Vani. Of course, your alma mater, yes.
A very good morning to all of you. And I think this session, the preceding session, suddenly puts us in between the two. It is research and practice, right? And when you look at research and practice, there is one thing which comes is the friction points when you transit between the two. And today we try to look at the politics of policy making, where we open questions with regards to how there are two different paths a policy specialist will take and rather a political organization will take. Okay? So if you look at in a very linear manner, how does a political analyst or a specialist would look at? He look at rational behavior, he look at special interest groups, and look at fiscal prudence and implement the policy. How would politics look at? They will look at this from the context of clientelism. Who are your electorate? Who will vote for you? And your policy gets dictated largely by that, also at the backdrop of your mind. Second, about fiscal prudence. Even if it is kind of questioned by policymakers, the private partnership model really works in this. That's the context. But both look at the same end result. That is an inclusive policy making, right? With all stakeholders are addressed. And how does it come? It comes largely from the way in the modern context where you see political autonomy is taking major shape, then it's closer? Okay. Yeah, sorry. From fiscal prudence. And political organizations are more sensitive to their own clients or the electorate. And thus the rent-seeking behavior starts when you start looking at these issues. So I open my question from to Professor Venkatesu, asking him, how does he look at this friction between the the policy specialists and the political organizations? Just one thing, because each political organization also mimics behavior of the others. You incentivize something, I incentivize more. Yeah, please.
Hello. Am I audible? Yeah. The question of these issues whether it's a clientelism, public-private partnership, freebies, all these things, I essentially, because let me start with some conceptual framework point of view, locate in the state civil society market and their relationship. The relationship between state and civil society is essentially rights and entitlement based. If you go by the constitution, it is supposed to be a right based approach. But when you look at the consequences in the post-independent period, it has taken pattern-client relationship, it has taken the form of the populist programs, it has taken the form of the politics for the business, power for the graft and quid pro quos, and now what is the current debate is policies for the freebies. That is the debate. So in this relationship between the state and the civil society, I will clarify, I will explain later. Then when you look at the relationship between state and market, it is basically the public-private partnership. State says that I do not have the sufficient technology, I also do not have the sufficient financial resources, but you, the market, the corporate sector, you are having. But I have the regulating authority, I have the regulating power, I have the land, I can give you. You can use it for any purpose. That is the kind of a relationship is known as the public-private partnership between the state and the corporate sector or market. And the relationship between the market and the civil society is essentially nowadays in the post-globalized phase is what is known as the corporate sector social responsibility. That is only the relationship that has been existing, so that even the parliament also passed an act for allocating certain percentage of the corporate's earning to spend as part of the CSR. I don't know whether it is for the social welfare or is it for the preventing the dissent that has been emerging from the civil society. So this is the relationship. That is the conceptual framework where I can locate it. Now coming to the rights and entitlement based approach to the freebies approach. You know, initially since 1950s onwards, so long as Congress party was dominant in inner politics from 1950s to almost the 1970s, it was essentially depending upon the rural landed dominant communities. The rural landed dominant communities, they made that the voters are supposed to be dependents upon them. That is what is called a Jajmani relationship. Jajmani relationship in the feudal context. I am a patron, you are a client, I have the land, you are the labor, I am the sarpanch, you are the by voter, you should be dependent upon me. I have a contacts with the mandal or block level government. I am a party president of the Congress party or some other political party. You are my dependent. That is the patron-client relationship that has made the voters as the subordinates to those people who are in the power structure. So that is the one phase. That phase was defeated, challenged with the rise of the populist programs. You know, people like N.T. Ramarao, he came with the populist programs. Until when you look at it retrospectively, while taking Andhra Pradesh as the example, so long as Congress party was in power in Andhra Pradesh politics, it was essentially going by this pattern-client relationship. But N.T. Ramarao has broken this pattern-client relationship through the populist programs. Populist programs, whether it is a 2 rupees kilo rice or it is a decentralization governance and taking the administration to the doorsteps of the people. This has, because involving of the people in the administration or getting the benefits, etc., that was the one phase. However, in the post-globalized phase, this populist program has exhausted. It has no competency, capacity to face the kind of things that challenges that has been coming up to the ruling elite. Therefore, people like Chandrababu Naidu has made politics as a business. So he has introduced the World Bank dictates of the user charges. The user charges, even if you are using the water for irrigation or you are going for the government hospital, you must pay the user charges. So that policy is for the business. And later, over a period of time, there is also what we have seen nowadays, even the people have become the rulers by making it as a nexus between the business and the political power. Business, the nexus. and that is what is called graft, quid pro quos. That is the another stage. And then you can see this freebies. Now there is a very big question, this freebies. What is the freebie? Whether giving Raitu Bandhu to the poorest, the poor farmer who is having the 1 acre to 4 acres, is it the freebie? Or is it the freebie to the state level police officer who is having the, by virtue of ancestral land of a huge amount of land, and giving the Raitu Bandhu to that police officer, is it the freebie? Or a minister, sitting minister, because of having the huge quantity of the land, and because of minister is getting a huge amount of money in under the Raitu Bandhu scheme, is it the freebie? See, in my view, if you are giving for the poorest, the poor farmer who is going, who is having the possessing the 1 acre of land to the 4 acres or 5 acres of land, if you are giving the money direct transfer, it is not a freebie, because the farmer has been giving a lot of subsidy to this country. The farmer rendering a lot. You can't grow the food stuff in the computers. This is a well-known fact. It is the farmer who has been feeding this entire country. So therefore, we must be clear about that what is the freebie. Who are the, whether we judge it by scheme or policy, or you should judge it by the beneficiary point of view. So therefore, so these are the how when you look at it from the empirical point of view in the post-independent period, from the policy implementation point of view, the kind of consequences that have been emerging and who have got benefited and who have the power relationship and the citizen relationship, these are the consequences.
I'll try to frame it in a more kind of conventional rights and obligations issue, when the state is a duty holder and the citizen is a right holder. And then the political organizations largely look at questions of looking at the electorate, or through reverie culture and others, as a context of mainstreaming the marginalized. And then the ethical idea of saying, well, we are thus making it inclusive. And I'll align it to the SDG goals also, leaving no one behind. So there's an inclusive context. I will ask Professor Amir Ullah, how do you look at, as a practitioner, to understand the context in which reverie culture, as the so-called word comes, the freebies coming up, in the political context and fiscal prudence both of the state?
Thanks, Mukul. Well, this debate really begins with the 101 of public policy, which is how does one define public good? And how do we redefine public goods as time goes by? The moment, and Professor Venkatesu pointed it out very well, that when a pure public good like water ceases to be one, or when roads cease to be, or we start seeing them as not pure public goods, then we start venturing into charging them and so on. The recent debate on, and it was a big and a very interesting debate for all of you who are researching these areas, the question of vaccines. Should vaccines be provided to everybody for free? There was a clear and present danger. There was absolutely no doubt as to how important the vaccine was and how it was important to get 90% of Indians vaccinated. And we were still wondering whether we should charge the vaccine at 1250 or 150 or charge anything for that at all. So there is, at one level, it's a pure question of the changing definition of public goods. On the other hand, is this point that Mukul you started off with, which is who has the right and whose duty it is to provide this. In an interesting twist, and Kennedy started it all by that famous assertion that ask what you can do for the country, and that's what we are increasingly doing now, and that's the new change we are seeing. That for everything, look at yourself. If there is sanitation, defecation, then what is it that you're doing for the country? In fact, it has reached to this extent that today the dominant debate in the unemployment discourse is a constant assertion that the job seeker is a villain. It is actually the job giver who is the big citizen. And suddenly looking for jobs, which is what most students in this school would do, is seen as in some sense an anti-national activity. It is actually job giving and job creation that becomes so it is through these that you see a twist in that public policy debate, and that is something that we see across, and that goes back to our original discussion on how the political landscape redefines public policy imperatives. Is it an admission of the fact that the state has failed in delivering some of the most basic public goods? If you take a look at our health sector, the answer is a big yes. That broken health system that Sujata Rao calls in her book as Do We Care, and that resulted in 5 million dead and several waiting in their parking lots for oxygen cylinders. Is that an admission of the fact that while the duty is with the state, but the state might not be capable, and therefore should relinquish it to the private sector? The freebie issue, that what is it that constitutes a democratic right? Who is the client of the democratic state? Is it the poor majority, or is it the most dominant interest group? And that's where I want to stop.
Vani, I will have to get the government perspective, or your kind of perspective of how the government would look. And, I won't look at the context of failure firstly as what Professor Amir said, but I said, okay, the state resources are less, or the state resources are very limited, and then the state enters into a private partnership with private players and say, well. And there are a lot of discussions on this issue, and the whole thing that boils is that the moment you do it, you incentivize the private players, right? By tax exemptions, loan or lands in holding. Now, there are two contexts of the flip side, and I'll want to your views on both. The first is that there is a risk of higher inequality going. Okay, there are special interest groups who comes up. There is higher risk of inequality coming up. And second is, does this role of the state really diminish, and the whole policy becomes very market oriented, right? In this way that the state becomes invisible because the private actors really come to implement the policy. How do you look at this kind of debate when the resources are limited, the state has to go into it, but yet also engage the private actors? Yeah, please, thank you.
Thank you, Mukul. I would first like to jump into the first question about the freebies. Well, you see, when you join service, then you have a lot of epithets for these schemes. You call them not just freebies, you call them political schemes, we call them a lot of names. But then down the line, whether it is that you get wiser or you take a second perspective at these schemes. The most well-known of these are, of course, the 2 rupee rice scheme, which came something like 30 years ago, and it's still alive. And every time it gets a new lease of life, a new name, and then every government almost makes the best of that scheme. And then, of course, you have the free power for farmers, and that's another scheme which is, by economists or by bureaucrats and, people who do a lot of number cracking and all. These are bad schemes. But then you start off, you believe that these are the schemes which are intended actually on the face of it for the poor, but then those who are garnering benefits are actually not really poor, and so on and so forth. But down the line, down the years that flow, one more observation that I would like to just keep it open before everybody is there a logic behind these schemes? is there a logic behind these schemes? Why is a politician who is definitely a better survivor than anybody else, why are they backing them up? The reason is not just the electoral politics. The reason is that if you do not, there is no venting in the system. There have been societies, there have been states, districts when we have just joined in service where people raided on go-downs for food. We don't have such institutions, such occurrences in our country anymore. You know, it's something that you would like to think about. So it is a way in which the dissent or the real friction is being absorbed by, you know, providing such schemes, which actually immediately give an immediate relief. Because of course we ought to be talking about, we bureaucrats do talk about the purchasing power being increased and then the distribution system being made perfect and then the criteria to be developed in such a way that they're foolproof and whatnot. But then those things need time and hunger doesn't really wait. So therefore, there is a logic behind these schemes and bureaucrats, maximum you meet people or you're forced to answer them or you're not even obliged to answer them in a way. So that's for a few hours. But for a politician, he is among them and he goes to them, he has to go to them and his survival depends on, you know, his acceptance, their acceptance of his candidature. Therefore, there is a logic behind these schemes, which may seem like a simple number game in a democratic vote politics, but there is a much bigger logic in it. And of course, there's no fooling ourselves that governance is anything to do with revolution or real social change. It's about maintaining a status quo, seeing that everything, law and order is fine, everybody is fine, you know. We're not here to really bring about some sort of a revolutionary change. I mean, governance is that. You're supposed to have an order in the society and so on. So it really fits the bill. And it is these schemes. They may be wicked, they may be whatever, you know, in the way you, the lenses you wear. But then they're serving a purpose. And I don't think it's the right thing to do, but still, it is for the immediate day-to-day existence. It is serving a very big purpose. Then the next thing about public-private partnership or so-called, then I would bring it down again to a very crass example. Our flirtation with, you know, private health. We were all enamored with the music in the reception rooms. We were very enamored by the kind of, you know, a good infrastructure that we had in the hospitals, so also in the schools. But today they're both very expensive. They're beyond reach for a common person. They're extremely beyond reach. Of course, they have given rise to much more employment through enterprises like insurance and many things that have come about. But then our flirtation with certain schemes, we have seen it. It doesn't mean that you do not encourage competition. It doesn't mean that you do not allow individual enterprise and much more capital to enter into that. But then there's a certain sense of priorities that is missing, I feel, in public policy. Whether it is education or health, which is extremely basic, the clarity as to where the conflict should be, where a strife to see that a quality of these services is maintained, that is somehow missing in the entire dialogue. So the friction that actually has to happen should emerge from people. For example, today there are any number of hospitals, there are any number of schools. In fact, we follow very religiously the accessibility norm and all that. So you have a school, you know, where children cannot walk beyond half a kilometer, you have a school there. And you have a hospital too. But then, there's nobody in the school and there's nobody in the hospital. These are the questions that should be asked. These are the points that actually should create friction between, you know, politicians and the people who implement. Sadly, we are missing on those scores. These are not the questions, this is not the friction that we are seeing in the society. So the reasons could be many and I won't take more time. Yeah, I hope it answers.
No, definitely. But Vani, I'll take a point from your context that I will you completely, when you mentioned the friction should come from the people. And I'll open it, the thing to all the three panelists. I agree that friction should come, but there is also a question of political stalemate, right? And that is, we do when we talk about rational logic, education, health, and everything, and elimination of poverty. But look at the other context. It doesn't serve political logic because freebie becomes more better, and then the question of excludable and non-excludable good comes. As a politician, for me, it is an excludable good is that if I am giving you a particular service as a part of my political agenda, nobody else can use it. And non-excludable is that I build a road. You vote for me or you don't vote for me, you still go on the road, right? And that goes for health and education. If that is the thing, I have a question to all. How can the friction come from the people itself when their own self-interest is governed by excludable and non-excludable goods? Please.
See, first of all, this friction from the people point of view. Why do you always expect the friction from the people? The Constitution itself you have already ensured. You have promised to every citizen of this country, I am going to provide this 1, 2, 3, 4 services to these people. They are paying. You are not. They are not dependents upon. They are not interested in a benevolent state. There for every service, the citizen of this country has been paying in the form of a tax. Who has been paying the GST today? Huh? That is what the new public management theory has came into existence because of the institution of the bureaucracy has failed in the world, even in America, so that you need the parallel institution called the market. Market is more effective in delivering of the service. But over a period of time, it has proved that it has become a nexus between the state institution of the bureaucracy and the market. That led to the descent over this civil society. That is what Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, it has started an agitation for the right to work, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. So in 2004 and 5, I was a part of this campaigning for the act. I was also part of facilitator for the designing of the act. I have involved in the capacity building for the rural development officials and elected public representatives of the local governance institutions. I was part of conducting social audit in Dungarpur district of Rajasthan and Anantapur district of Andhra Pradesh, and also impact assessment. I don't agree that this should become a target-oriented program, and so that it is easy for implementation. To whom is it easy? Is it when you look at the things from the implementer's point of view? When it is easy, then it is most difficult for the receiver's point of view. So that is the serious issue one must take into. For that, you need again the friction from the people. So my justification, no need of any friction, because we have already agreed that the post-independent, the institution of the civil service is an instrument for the social transformation in the country. Otherwise, what was the purpose of the institution of the bureaucracy during the colonial period? Just for the maintaining of the law and order, collecting of the revenue. Why Jawaharlal Nehru wanted to continue the steel-framed legacy of the colonial bureaucracy? Because you have been redesigned. The constitution has got a different purpose. The electoral democracy has got a different purpose. You are supposed to be an agent of the social transformation. For that, you no need to until you get the friction. Already there has been a prevalent child labor. The minimum Nyantam Mazdoori is not being implemented. And there has been a lot of gender disparity, and there is a voiceless people have been there in this country. The woman is not having the voice, the lower caste people are not having the voice, the Dalits are not having the voice, and the tribal people are not having the voice. If there is any dissent on the social media, then there is a possibility for the registering of a case. What is the form that you are expecting the friction from the civil society or citizen or community? That is the very big challenge. You are meant for the fulfilling of the constitutional obligation and the promises made in course of the electoral democracy during the elections. Elections is one of the important occasion where the people will be getting the opportunity to express their dissent, friction. And then another thing is that the people are not casting their vote. During the elections, 65 to 70% of the votes are being casted. All these people are not casting their vote just for the sake of freebies. As a network member of the Center for the Study of Developing Societies and Lokniti, we have been doing a number of studies. There are multiple factors. Freebie is one of the minor factors. Your leadership matters, your ideology matters, your national agenda matters, your whole agenda, social agenda that matters, your policy that matters. So these are multiple factors which influence.
I'd just like to add to what Professor Venkatesu is saying so clearly. that point is a great point as to where in public policy making and when public policy comes together with democracy, where does the friction come from? Where does resistance come from? Certainly it comes from the people when they vote. And it has always been a mystery as to why do people vote for certain issues and why don't they vote for certain issues. For example, in India, why is it that you never hear a politician talk about healthcare? Right. In the US, is there any other issue that you hear about during elections? And have you ever seen an Indian politician promise healthcare? Yes, there are promises of school building, school education enters, but interestingly, you have state getting into areas that typically do not belong to the state in any political economy discourse. Telangana, the state promises wedding halls, community, and a dole for women who are getting married. It's one big scheme where every woman who gets married gets 50,000 and now 1 lakh rupees. And the question always has been that should you give the money for young girls to get married, or should you give it to girls who don't get married? I mean, and what you do, what the voter does is votes for those who do get married. Therefore, you have a rush of people getting married the day they turn 18. So, so the question is that where does that friction come from, and why do certain aspirations matter more than the others at one time? This health issue, and those of us who work in health just can't understand this. That why do governments that do horribly badly on health get elected? And why does the voter never demand anything? We asked a couple of chief ministers and he said, nobody wants healthcare. Why should I promise it? It doesn't fetch me any return. So there's a clear understanding there. But the more important issue, and I just want to add to what Professor Venkatesu is saying, is that the friction in any democracy comes not really from the people, unless at the time of voting. That's the only time that they can vote. Protest, we don't generally protest in India, and we don't, like Vani is saying, we don't go and do food riots and raid godowns, even when we are very hungry. 150 million of us are very hungry, go to sleep every day without food, and yet we don't do that. That's something about us. But our friction in a society where, as Professor Venkatesu said it so clearly, that a lot of us are voiceless and are not articulate, our friction comes from the agencies that are supposed to give that friction. And those agencies are the media and the judiciary. And therein you realize why the Indian friction is not happening. If the state then starts clamping down on them, then that friction is gone. Then who's going to articulate that friction? If media gets locked up, or if judges die, then who else is going to voice that friction? That is why your point is so right, Professor Venkatesu, that people then are left with that vote, and that is a vote every 5th year, where the aspirations are so amazingly and so puzzlingly different today. See what's happening in the Karnataka elections. You have a politician who comes and articulates this so clearly, saying, don't ask for roads, don't ask for education, ask for love jihad. That is what we will give you. So that's what the state is giving, and that's the clientele that it is addressing, and that is getting it votes. So why not?
No, whatever. I think the responsibility of people should not be brushed aside. I think we have done this long enough. I do agree that bureaucracy does play a very important part, and yes, they do uphold the constituency. All that is fine. But then the public policy is something which is done by the political executive as well as the bureaucracy. And it's not as if a cabinet secretary or someone can evolve his own policy despite what the politics believes in. And I said there is a logic to it. There's a logic if we are not doing any food riots, there's a logic to it. That there is some sort of co-option in the society, that whatever you can call it. But then through policies that has been stilled or numbed or, slowed down, whatever. But then, yes, though the limited purpose of the bureaucracy is to implement things properly. But when the policy is flawed, or when the policy is not being demanded to be better. For example, right now the question is about lot of schools and lot of hospitals, they are existing, fine. There are also doctors appointed. Then is a doctor arriving on time and is a doctor working there? That depends on whether people are going to this hospital in faith. I'll give again another example. This was tried in Dharmapuri in Tamil Nadu. There was one very bright collector who had done this, a lady collector, an excellent officer. What she had done was that, see, when the people go to the hospital, the doctor is not there. Okay, and then they will not go back there unless there's a guarantee or an assurance of somebody there, isn't it? If there's no diagnostic test there or there's no doctor in the hospital, there's no point for the people to go. So then the doctor says, when there's nobody coming here, then why is it that I have to be there? Or, I can come at any time I want and so on. So it is who's responsible for who. So this collector had done a wonderful thing. What she did was, every Friday, she said all the maternal, all the pregnant women in the vicinity, in the villages which are attached to this hospital, they come over there for all the tests. Okay, and pregnancy is not something that you suddenly, you are surprised with anemia, because you're supposed to check them through 3 trimesters, through 9 months. So it is the responsibility of the doctor and the sub-center there to look after that. But then people don't come there. Now when you ask them, they say the doctors may not be there, and then the doctor says that anyway people don't come here, so what is my responsibility, so on. So what she had done was to see that all these pregnant women would come on a fixed day, okay, and they were getting a meal there. There's a scheme which gives a meal for the pregnant women, mind you, and whether it gets implemented or not is not known. So they would all come to the sub-center, to the PHC, and then they would have their midday meal, and then you have a crowd of 50 to 60 pregnant women there, and now you tell me which doctor will not come, isn't it? So it is the friction by that, what I mean is a proper response from people by way of demanding a service as a right. That is sadly missing. That is sadly missing. And this kind of this training in the...
I'll just be a little more forceful on that one. I don't think that it is the bureaucracy that has any role here. The supply of public policy is the elected representatives, and the demand for public policy comes from the people.
Precisely.
And you said it very rightly. It is the bureaucracy maintains the status quo. The danger that is happening is that we are shifting that blame to the bureaucracy. When derisively we call the bureaucracy babus who are unable to implement, that's a danger. That's the same danger you hear when you blame the doctors for everything that is wrong with the medical system. Sorry.
Absolutely. I mean, sorry, Mani, you want to say something? Actually, that's why the whole context of rights-based is something you create demand from the people and then they demand the accountability of the political dispensation as well. But I'm going to put the next point again, and it's about, I take some lead from my student Rawson's point of unintended consequences. The most important unintended consequence is that once a policy is implemented, it never ceases. Right? How do you look at that? I think that's the biggest friction point, is that you have it, and the unintended consequences, you cannot stop it. Okay? COVID, free rations, you could never do that. Now it's continuing as a matter of policy. Whether it has fiscal prudence or not, nothing. I just want your views on that. Vani, what would you like to say on that? And
the life cycle.
Yeah.
There's no life cycle. It's an eternity.
Yes,
right?
correct. Okay.
Right. That means that's a signal that there is a vested interest there. As simple as that. It's not people. It's not just people. There's a vested interest. There are huge industries which run on any scheme which is outliving its purpose. But we are oblivious to a number of schemes which just disappear, and we are not even aware of them. There are many schemes like scholarship for the poor. There are many schemes we would not even notice, and there's nobody asking for them. So do not think that schemes do not disappear. They do. They do.
Okay, thank you very much. I just invite questions from the audience.
Just one point.
Sure, please.
I fully agree with 2 points raised by Vani Prasad garu. One is that even V. Ramachandran, the acting chairman of the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, I was working with him. In fact, he drafted a series speeches even to the series of prime ministers. Such a stature, senior civil servant also used to say that the political executive, the question of the political executive. Second thing is that demand oriented. Demand oriented is the ultimate objective that is supposed to be, that should come from the citizen. So I think Madam has been quite rightly said that that it is supposed to be demand driven. Thank you.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for these great insights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please go ahead. Please be louder. We'll come to you thereafter, gentlemen.
My question is that it was a great insight, but for me this is all, I think, an old school. I will go directly to the concept of governance and the view of governance. How developed countries view governance and how developing nations view governance. What is the conservative view of governance and what is the liberal view of governance? And number third, blanket to all of these sessions from previous one to these ones, everything is that we are empowering and giving the power to financial institutions. Obviously, when you give power to financial institutions, obviously they will look for economy like a health sector. Health sector is directly associated to life insurance. Life insurance is directly associated to hospitals. So this is my analysis because I have worked on this. I'm a PhD scholar from Mullah Azad National Urdu University. So for this developed country view of governance is economic prosperity only. For developing, it is socio-economic or political. And for conservatives, it's different. And for liberals, it is minimum government and maximum privatization, maximum market. Can you give some insights about that? It is right or not? And it is just old. We are just discussing it. It's just an old school for this Indian democracy.
Oh, I like that you said it's all old school. Fine.
Can we take the second question also, please? Absolutely. Yeah. Please go ahead. The gentleman. Yes.
Hi. So a lot of the debate on policy friction was focused on freebies. I would like to bring one more legacy issue, which is alcohol prohibition, which is also creating a lot of debate with Bihar and Gujarat. Could you throw some light on the friction between the public policy specialists like, say, Dr. Bang in Gadchiroli, Maharashtra, and states where the anti-alcohol argument is that it generates a lot of tax revenue, the enforcement requires a lot of vast resources, there's a right to choice, there's also a political nexus between politicians and alcohol lobbyists, right? And the pro-alcohol prohibition argument is that women and children suffer a lot of abuse, which is a majority of the population, and there's a huge economic loss to families, which is well documented, and also the right to choice argument, the choice is taken away when the person is addicted, so there's no question of right to choice. So this is a debate that's been happening for, I'm sure, centuries, because alcohol has been prevalent for long. So how can there be a healthy dialogue around something like this?
Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, as there are a lot of debate about public goods, I thought that I can put my points on this. As a student of economics, I feel that if policy by government is the public policy, or policy by government is government is the fiscal policy that you mentioned, why the goods and deliveries by the government are not the public goods? Mostly, starting from the public finance specialist, starting from the Dalton to PIGO, you never see that exclusivity of public goods or non-exclusivity was not there. And in 1980s, suddenly these items fed into the public policy system. With Simon coordinates come into the picture, and this is the exclusion and this is not exclusion. And all these theories have come into the practice into the either environmental science and public welfare economics. These things came to rise. Then comes the picture about what the government actually policy
For
design.
the paucity of time, could you come to the question?
Yeah, a government policy design, whether health is a public good or education is a public good. You see, since 1990 to the present, both the education and health sector, either policy designing is, it is an act of designing the policy. The total expenditure of the government with respect to education and health and remain constant. Either it remains to 3 to 3.2%. And we have different schemes which have been just like designed so that we are expecting a lot of expectation from the government that education for health and all and health for all. So these are the act of designing the policy as well as looking at the public goods with a separate context.
I see your point.
Yes,
thank you. Let's go ahead.
The first thing I like about the status quo remark, the old school remark. Yes, I think everything is old school. I mean, even capitalism is old school. Now you really got to find something new. You got to find new solutions. I totally agree with that, and we are waiting for that, I guess. Well, yes, is it market or is it state? So I think something else has to emerge, because I don't think either is perfect. And we are seeing it a very costly kind of an experience, and we have to evolve something else through that. The next about prohibition, well, again, it's a subjective decision, and then if you think that, your purpose is to see that you maximize your revenue, because it has its own logic, so that you can fund other programs and so on. That's one logic, and then you take a decision based on that. But then, you garb terms like choice, and you're actually using weakness of somebody, then that is another thing. All right, so again, this is what I mean to say. Why are we always looking to government or just the politicians to decide what we need? Why is there no proper political civic learning or, involvement or empowerment of people, where they just demand from a government or any system to implement rules as rules are? You never have anybody attacking any office or anything to implement rules in the right sense. Either it is that, again, of course, in the political science or public policy terms, you have good terms for it, but then it's like, you got to give me the, I deserve the benefit more than X, Y, Z, so on. So the very basic point is that somewhere the society, the civic society, people per se, have to learn this, to produce that friction so that they really can understand what is good for them. Why are we always deciding and these matters are getting decided? There's no voice for people. The excuse cannot go on for long. So it has to be a very educated response. We do not see much happening, whether it is in the universities or even in the bureaucracy or anywhere. This sort of protest or an openness and kind of views that we hear are not really, I don't think it's really happening.
So, two questions. This governance point of view. In 2010, I was a member in the delegation led by Union Minister for Rural Development and Panchayati Raj and Joint Secretary Rishikesh Mohanty to Norway. Norway is one of the most developed country. See, the governance issues in Norway was, one is that reducing of the age of the voting from 18 years to 16 years. Second is that increasing of the women representation in the local body institutions. But of course, by that time, India was much more advanced even than the Norway. But I don't know whether, when we go by comparative analysis of the women representation in the constitutional public sphere, whether India is more developed country or Norway is more developed country, that is another one, very big question for the research. Then coming to this question of anti-ARAC movement, I think I will trace out the today's National Rural Livelihoods Mission policy at the national level to anti-ARAC movement. That is one of the demand-driven, it is a social movement-centric public policy that has evolved as a result of the anti-ARAC movement. As a follow-up action for the anti-ARAC movement, there is a program called in South Asia Poverty Alleviation Program, Andhra Pradesh District Poverty Initiations Program, Andhra Pradesh Poverty Rural Reduction Program. It has focused on three things. One is capacity building for the women, building of the social capital through the institution building, and then support for the livelihoods. So on the basis of these three pillars, today there is a national level policy called as National Rural Livelihoods Mission. So that is one of the greatest achievement of this anti-ARC movement. I am not just look at it only from the economic cost benefit analysis point of view, long-term social capital building point of view, that is what Robert Putnam says, and also the policy contribution and voice of the voiceless. Yes, because of during the elections, one political party has came with the interest of 1 rupee for self-help groups, another political party came with a 25% interest, and another political party without any interest. That is the beauty of the...
Thanks, Professor. We've run out of time completely. My one line summing up and answer to all three questions is that, the public policy is not governance, firstly. Secondly, it's not about policing people. So long as public policy remains in the realm of the legal and illegal and doesn't get into moral and immoral, then we won't have need for such discussions. Thank you very much, Mukul.
Thank you very much. I think I won't take more minutes. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much for the panel. Thank you.